GrowShow is the only live streaming show on the internet that gives you proven, actionable, science-backed tools and techniques to help you grow your business, grow your team, and grow yourself. Hello, my name is David Meade. I work with organizations all across the world on the proven science of high performance, and this episode is all about leadership. What small changes can you make and take to help move the needle on your people's performance from good to great? Now, I don't care whether the word leadership is inside your title or not. You have a responsibility to try and positively influence, lead, and guide the people that you work alongside, whether they are on your left or on your right in the office, or frankly, on your left or on your right inside a Zoom call. For me, leadership is everyone's responsibility, even if you have a group of people in your organization who are hard to move. And you know the type of people that I'm talking about. They've been with you for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And no matter what change programs you introduce as a leader, you simply cannot get them to shift their performance. Well, we know the real secret to this is to finding purpose for your people, establishing a shared horizon, a shared direction, something that they can all push towards. Now, many of my clients say, well, David, in my industry, it's incredibly difficult for us to find a purpose. But I don't care what industry or sector you work in, it is always possible to find a purpose. And in this episode, I'm going to show you the real science of how you can apply it to get extraordinary results for yourself as a leader and everyone inside your team. Now, you know, at GrowShow, all of our shows are always based on the evidence, science, and research, and this episode is no different. And for our first piece of research, we are going to a clinical setting. You might not realize it, but one of the biggest challenges that they have in the clinical space are hospital-acquired infections. These are the entirely avoidable infections that happen when a patient is inside getting some clinical care. And the numbers bear this out. In the UK, there are about 300,000 hospital-acquired infections every year and 1.7 million in the US. Now, of course, this comes with a huge financial cost. In total, it's about $45 billion a year, but the human cost is ever more great, with around 100,000 deaths and in some cases much more because of these avoidable conditions. But the great news is there is a simple solution that we can all take part in. We know that organizations, clinical spaces where hand washing is more frequent, hospital-acquired infections are significantly lower. Now, we've all heard the advice recently around the pandemic, around how washing our hands is the first thing that will quash it, and it is the same in this situation. But as a leader, how do you influence your team to take part in this helpful, healthy activity more often? One thing I will say, as a little aside before we go, we know there is a huge gap, a huge gender gap between those who wash their hands and those who don't. I'm ashamed to tell you this, but some of the worst research that I've read recently suggests that only 1/3 of men and 2/3 of women wash their hands after they've been to the bathroom. I know, it turns out that men are absolutely disgusting. Some researchers from across the world, led by a guy called Adam Grant and some colleagues, came up with a really simple test to see how leaders could change behavior in hand washing. And they created 3 really simple interventions and tested it over 2 weeks. They came up with a really simple poster campaign, and each different group was exposed to a different poster. Group number 1's poster said, hand hygiene prevents you from catching diseases. So this is very personal. This is about the individual protecting themselves through hand washing. That was group number 1. Group number 2, their posters said, hand hygiene prevents patients from catching diseases. So instead of me, this is we. Instead of protecting you as a person, it's protecting the people around you. So 2 very different approaches between group 1 and group 2. Group number 3 was the control group, and they simply saw a poster that said, gel in, wash out. Now, 3 really different approaches. 1 is about protecting yourself. 1 is about protecting the people around you, and 1 is a simple control. The results were extraordinary. The we-centric one that was about protecting other people dramatically outperformed the rest. Even though you might think as a human being, well, I'm out for myself, the fact is, even though we are individuals in our organizations, we are we-centric. We want to do things that have a purpose, that have an outcome, that have an impact, not just for ourselves, but for the community around us as well. It's incredibly important that we remember the power of this we-centric approach, because whether you're an individual or not, we feel this urge and this need to be part of a team. We will always beat me. And your job as a leader is to create that we in your organization, no matter how big or small it is. This is one of my favorite quotes. No finance, no strategy, no technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. Our job is to find this we purpose moment in our organization so that our people can achieve their best work. And some of you will say, well, we just manufacture widgets, we do fairly straightforward work. I can see how you can find a purpose inside the clinical space, but it's difficult for us to find that. The truth is, there is always an opportunity to find a purpose in the work that you do. And if it's not easy, find that collegiality, find that team approach, create that sense of togetherness. When you look into the research, few things matter more when it comes to driving and motivating your people as a leader than making sure that you invest time to understand what your purpose and their purpose is. And the research really does bear this out. Let me tell you about a really simple study that was carried out in the university space. Some employees in a university donation call center, all they had to do was call up alumni, former students of the university, and ask them to make a donation that would benefit current students who perhaps couldn't afford their fees, for instance. And they had mixed levels of success and results. So some researchers decided to try a simple game. They divided the participants into 3 groups. And the 3 groups had 5-minute interventions before their shifts on 2 consecutive days. So on one day, they had a 5-minute intervention. The next day, they had a 5-minute intervention that happened just before their shift. And in the 3 groups, here's what each of those interventions were made up from. One group was to read stories about the personal benefits that they would experience from working in the call center. They might develop their sales skills. They might increase their communication skills. They might become more motivated, and they might get useful experience that will help them in their career. Remember, that was the me group. The second group were the we group. They were told about the beneficiary impact. In other words, the impact that the donations that they were raising from making phone calls would have on students that they haven't even met yet. And the third group was the control group. They just read random stories during that 5-minute intervention. So to be clear, there were 3 groups. They only had 2 5-minute interventions before their shift. One group read about the benefits that they would get from working in the call center. The second group read about the benefits that the donations would create for the students who would receive them. And the third group just read random stories. The beneficiary impact group, not only did they double both the number of donations that they got, but also the value of them as well. Now, why is this the case? Because when we are linked to a sense of purpose, a sense of making a difference for someone else, it transforms the way that we work. Now, I want to be clear about this. This was only a 5-minute intervention. That's it. 5 minutes before their shift. That happened 2 times across 2 consecutive shifts, and it doubled the amount of money that they earned. Now, I want you to ask yourself, if you are a sales professional, if you are a leader, if you are guiding, supervising, or directing people of any kind, what could you do with that 5 minutes that would inspire them to realize the impact that they might have? So this episode has been all about leadership, and I think it's clear that when we link leadership and outcomes, that we can transform the results of our people. But what can you do today to make a really big difference? Well, the first thing is, as a leader, you need to ask yourself, what is driving your people? And if you think it is salary, if you think it is their pay, you are wrong. You need to think about what that intangible thing is that's driving them to do their best work. Ask yourself, who is your end beneficiary? And when is the last time that you gave your people the opportunity to hear from them, to hear about the impact that their work has made, to hear about the outcomes and how you have changed their lives? I don't care if you work in IT, if you work in banking, if you work in the automotive industry, there is always an end beneficiary for your product or your service. So how can you bring that individual alive for your people and for your team? Once you have that, that contributes towards your team, your organization, and your people's purpose. And share that purpose far and wide. Allow your employees to translate it into their own language, into their own vocabulary, and into their own verbiage. And it will skyrocket their results and the work that they do every day. But do not ignore the fact that this purpose is not just about the individual. It can be collective as well. You can have an organizational level purpose. You can have a group or team level purpose. And then every employee must have their why as well. In future episodes of GrowShow, I'll go into more detail into the real science of how we build purpose. But for now, I think these two pieces of research have been really insightful and will start your gears turning. In the next episode of GrowShow, we will be looking at mindset, the real science of how you encourage the people around you to achieve great performance. How can you set goals effectively and encourage them to achieve them? Thank you so much for coming back to see GrowShow every single week. Thank you so much for your loyalty, and I'll see you next time on GrowShow.